Hi everyone, this is Burgundy, and this is another episode of Yoga Talks. We are still continuing on with the book, The Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah Adele. We are getting close to the end. This week we discussed the chapter on Svadhyaya, which is self-study. Getting to my page, I should have had it ready. Self-study. So this was an interesting chapter. They all are for all of their own reasons. But I think that there are a lot of aspects to self-study that they're very applicable to right now. And we do discuss this a bit in the during our discussion on Wednesday. But recognizing, I think this is really important, recognizing that each one of us, including ourselves, comes to every single moment with all of our history, all of the things that we were taught, the things that we've experienced, our pains, our tragedies, moments of joy, everything that has ever happened to us comes with us into every moment. So number one, it's important to recognize that when you are interacting with somebody else, recognize that you are experiencing that person with your baggage, with your package of stuff, but also that they're coming to you with their package of stuff. And recognizing that, we can't fit people into a nice little wrapped up package. Again, I'm still using the same word, but, nobody is going to be perfect and nobody is going to fit how we want them to be, for right or for wrong. So whether or not you're talking about, your love partner in life, or just the stranger that you meet on the street, we can't make people fit into the perfect way that we would like them to be. And in fact, how about we actually work more on ourselves and trying to be the best version of ourselves? And in that, recognize your own stuff. Like the saying goes, sweep your own front porch. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. I think that this is probably there. I think that there are a few of the Yamas and Niyamas that really encourage or sort of inspire a lot of deeper thought. A lot more time thinking about what this thing means. Not only what does it mean in general, but what does it actually mean? How do you apply it to yourself? And this is one that I think you can apply every day to every single moment, in all sorts of ways. So I hope you enjoy this, and I'll see you on the back end of this conversation. Enjoy. Svadhyaya, self-study. So her quick little description here. Svadhyaya is about knowing our true identity as divine and understanding the boxes we are wrapped in. So I really liked her metaphor of the boxes and the way that she describes these boxes around this pure consciousness. Okay, so let me back up. The yogis teach us that as human beings we are packaged much like this diamond ring, and she told a story about her and her little brother buying her dad a diamond ring. Very sweet story. I really enjoyed that. I actually got a little choked up reading it. And so we are at the core divine consciousness. Around this pure consciousness, we are packed in boxes of our experience, our conditioning, our belief systems. And these boxes are things like how we identify ourselves, what we believe to be true, our preferences and dislikes, our fears and imagination. All of these boxes are informed by country, culture, gender, town, ancestors, and family history, groups we belong to, and our personal experience. This is so crucial to understand, period. I'm just going to put a period on that. In self-study, recognizing, and she goes into this deeper in the rest of this chapter, the understanding that you cannot know something else until you understand yourself, because what you see is a reflection of yourself. What you experience is a reflection of yourself. And we talked about this, we talked about an aspect of this a little bit in one of our previous discussions, where I can't know anybody very well. I see the outside box. I see the package. I see maybe what, people allow me to see. And the rest of it, I'm putting my perception. This is what I think you must be then. So having an understanding when you come into a situation, when you meet a person, when you experience anything, recognizing that you're bringing along a lot of the definition as you step into this, that can help mitigate potential argument or confusion and so forth. So, even this morning we were talking a little bit about text messaging and how that can be misconstrued. You bring your experience and your personality, your mood, your everything into the text message or the email on your side of things, and the person sending it to you or the person you're communicating with, they have their little world, and all you have is black and white letters, and in between you're missing emojis. And you've got these damn emojis that I can't figure out.
Really? I feel like they actually do help me to be like, oh, what is this person doing? It was like, oh, they put a little winky face in. Oh, thank God. I'm not going to misinterpret it.
Oh my God.
That's what I do. Emojis have helped me.
Yeah.
I can tell you, the one emoji that I hate more than anything that's been around, and it's an emoticon. I hate the frowny face. It drives me crazy. I hate frowny faces. Anyway, so does anybody have any initial comments or thoughts about self-study? I absolutely love this chapter.
I liked it too. I guess, I don't know what I was thinking coming in self-study. It was totally not what I was expecting. I thought
what were you thinking?
I thought it was like, it's going to be the importance of learning, and it's really about self-examination.
Yeah.
I thought it was more about just being a lifelong learner, kind to better yourself and that kind of thing. So when I started reading, I'm like, wait a minute, is this the right chapter and everything? So it was just, but I like that. I like the whole, and of course it's great that she brought in Kung Fu again. So that's good too, right?
Kung Fu is always good.
But yeah, so that was my initial kind of I was not expecting that exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But
now a case could be made for this to actually be what you thought, because the way that I learned about Svadhyaya is that you take it upon yourself to study, and that you are studying the texts and things like that.
And maybe in my yoga teacher stuff that's where I read.
You didn't make that up.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
It's good I didn't make stuff up.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and that's kind of what I thought too. So I said I did not read this one, but just seeing self-study, I immediately kind of thought of, I don't know, it's almost reading the text and being the mystical side of it, which, that's just what I thought.
Yeah.
But just our first 5 minutes of discussion was oh, no, I was completely wrong about that. Oh, this sounds interesting, as opposed to before I was not as interested.
Yeah.
But
I found it very uplifting.
Yeah. In what way?
Just that I guess I identified with it personally. I was always afraid to make myself vulnerable or to allow people to see, I was afraid I was transparent, so I thought it was about the wrapping paper. And now it's some of the best gifts that I can share are not even wrapped. So personally now I realize it's not about my wrapping paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess I needed that process. Part of me is oh gosh, I wish I had read this book. I wish I had done this, 20 years ago. But it's just where I am now.
Well, and I think that, for that, experience means a lot. I mean, because if I think back to myself, high school, those are some really hard years. And then, I mean, you know, I probably didn't come into my own, well, I can say this. I know for a fact, because I remember the feeling, when I was 22, I finally got settled and I felt like I was comfortable with myself. However, that doesn't mean that I had figured myself out yet. I was still absolutely concerned about the package, the outside stuff. I probably stopped really being too concerned about that within the past 10 years. So I had to get into my 30s to really let go of that. But I think that that's experience, because what we do know is, because we're humans, the first thing we see in a person is their package, their outside, you know, their wrapping. You know, the question of what do you notice first? Somebody's eye color, somebody's hair color, their face, their shoes, I don't know, depends on who you are. But it's something that's external. And so, yeah, to a certain extent, some of the outside matters a little bit, but not really, because that's not really who you are. It's sort of a reflection, right? Because the way that you choose to present yourself says a lot about who you are, but it isn't who you are.
It is very, I identify like with the freeing aspects. I think you were talking about the idea of like, you know, she got so upset about the person wearing her shoes, right? And when she thought about it, she's like, why am I really upset? Oh, it's because when I was growing up, I was taught you had to ask somebody to borrow something. This person didn't ask, and so I don't really care that they're using my shoes. I'm upset about the fact they didn't ask to use my shoes. And when she like identified that, she was able to say, or able to think to herself, what's the big deal, you know? So
the lady could have just accidentally put on her shoes.
Could have accidentally put on her shoes, sure, but just, you know, and there was like this freedom in that, or some just kind of like release of like, you know, whatever, you know, it's like, you know, it's just my shoes, so what? You know, so, yeah, I like that.
And that piggybacks on the we cannot love or hate something about another person or the world unless it's already in us
Right.
first. And
Yes.
that's so true. It's nice to be reminded of that daily.
Yeah. And I think that recognizing, you know, and she points this out, and this is something that I know that I am always guilty of, but it's that it usually does start with you, although it's not usually about you. So you know, it's an interesting balance in that. Like, so personally, if I feel that somebody has been, I don't know, sassy or whatever, somebody's in a bad mood or whatever, my first inclination is, oh, what did I do? It has nothing to do with me. But on the flip side, my initial reaction to somebody is my fault. Like, I did that. That reaction that I just gave to myself was created in me. That person didn't give it to me, you know? And, you know, I take things very personally. I can't help it, you know? Like, for example, I'll be very honest. One of the reasons why I got rid of MindBody, the program for scheduling things, but I also, primarily, I got rid of Constant Contact, my email program, because it broke my heart when people unsubscribed. Because people do know when you unsubscribe from their emails, they get a list and they get a list of names. And so I was just like, oh God, like I couldn't handle it. And it was only like 1 or 2 a week, but it was enough that I was just like, but yeah, how much do I hate the mass emails I get? But I was absolutely taking it personally. So then I just stopped using Constant Contact. So I don't email anybody anymore because I can't handle it.
It makes you feel any better. I do the same thing because I have that through MailChimp, and I saw somebody unsubscribed. I was like, no. And then I looked, and it was me. And it was because I messed something up when I forwarded something. So somebody unsubscribed me, and I was like, all right, well, that's okay. So they forwarded, I don't know, it was through a forward, and I felt better. But so I do the same thing. It's like, oh no.
Right.
But I was like, I have to find out who this unsubscriber is.
Right. But
Even though it didn't matter.
But in reality, it's not against me. They're not rejecting me. They just don't want more emails, you know.
So do you never unsubscribe to emails because you don't want to make that person feel sad?
I only unsubscribe if it's like a big, huge corporation, or I didn't
Yeah.
specifically ask
Right.
for it.
Like you bought something from them once, and now you have.
Yeah,
an
like
email.
Micro Center. I'm like, can you stop? I will continue shopping at your
Yeah.
place. I just don't need your damn email.
I do actually intentionally leave some things on, like
Yes.
for especially for like nonprofit things.
Uh-huh.
I just delete them, but I'll just be like, I'm gonna stay on there so they can like have
Have
their
the
numbers
numbers.
or whatever. Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I do. They're like, we have like, yeah, I specifically because I also feel bad in that way.
Yeah.
I know it's ridiculous, but I'm like, you know what? I can just delete their email. They only send one a week. It's fine. Delete.
Yes, it's not that hard. Yeah, I know. It's.
This funny.
So one of the things that I did want to point out, as far as her description of the boxes that were packed in, have to do with, you know, all of these things. I think this is the thing that popped right into my mind when I was reading that paragraph is this is important to remember and hold on to, especially right now in our country, with the huge divide, with all of the stuff that's going on. The absolute most important thing that we need to continue to hold on to in our country is communication and discourse and communicating with people who we don't agree with. We always need to be able to communicate and talk to people that have different opinions. All of this right here, even though we share something in common, we have different opinions on a lot of things. And you should be able to still communicate with people and not hate them, because we're all coming to it for a reason. And if you have a little inkling of ability to practice and have an understanding of Svadhyaya, of self-study, of recognizing this is the stuff that I'm coming to with this. I'm going to be gentle and kind to the people that I talk to and see if I can teach them a little bit somehow how to recognize, okay, you're coming to this from your point of view. How can we maybe meet in the middle? And maybe I'll never change your mind on your political opinion or whatever the thing is. Pick the topic. But at least we might be able to meet in the middle on, we're humans. There is something that we have in common. We want to be happy. We want whatever, you know. So these are very important things to come to. So, you know, what I try to hang on to when I'm reading the news, listening to things, whatever, is nobody is born evil. Everybody is coming from a place where they were taught these things or whatever. And so there's an aspect where I feel very bad for people who truly are extremely negative and violent and aggressive because they weren't born that way. You know, that doesn't excuse violence, but, you know, thinking about their narrative and how they were raised is important, and where they're coming from. So it doesn't come out of nowhere, is my point. The other thing that I found that I sort of want to tie together, the story that she brought up about the God is actually in us. I thought that was really cool, where, you know, God makes humans and is all of a sudden like, oh my God, I screwed up. Humans are horrible. Where am I supposed to go so that they can find me and all of that? And or so that they won't be able to find me, you know, because they keep seeking me out and so forth. And then God's like, I know, I'll hide inside each human. They'll never find me there. And the whole point is, it's in us. You know, the goodness, the divine is in us. And this is very similar to a Buddhist thought that for people who are actually seeking to become a bodhisattva, which is a Buddha, it's already in you. You're actually just finding it. So think about like a sculpture, like David, and how originally he was just this big block of marble, and it just took an artist like taking away all the stuff on the outside to find the sculpture that was on the inside. And that's what it is. Again, going back to the wrapping, like what's inside that is divine and pure and wonderful, and know that about everybody and not just yourself. So did anybody write down, for those of you that didn't read it, did anybody write down the 5 words?
No.
Okay.
I did it out loud. I mean,
Did you?
kind of did it.
So the question was, for those of you that didn't read it, without thinking, quickly write down the first 5 things that come to your mind that describe the world as you see it. Do you have?
Blue. Libraries, yoga, bike, and cat. I don't know. Those are the first 5 things I think of that were like I did today.
Those are you there.
So,
That's your world.
right.
Yeah. Marianne, what do you have?
I did. My bike's over there. Yes.
I did love and peace and like all beautiful, happy thoughts.
There you go. Jeremy, what did you have?
I didn't do it.
Good. Think of 5. Phil just made it
I
up.
just did it. I just made it up.
I was thinking ocean, sky, trees, cars, and I don't know, tomatoes. How about that?
Nice. All right.
How about you?
So I had
Oh,
vast, struggling, overpopulated, connected, beautiful, and ugly. And beautiful and ugly was one. Okay, so then she says, now look at what you've written or said, just thought up. Every comment that you have, or every comment that you have used to describe the world will tell you more about yourself than about the world. So, have you not just been forced to think of words, tomato and whatnot? But I mean, still, like even on the spot right there, you guys are choosing to pick words that somebody else wouldn't pick. So even your spur of the moment stuff is still a reflection of who you are. The words that come out to you at that moment. So it's just interesting to
I've
think
just been
about.
thinking about planting tomatoes since gardening. So
Yeah,
Well, and it is interesting.
but not
like,
everybody is.
Well, and just like you both kind of picked a little more like general things about like the
Mhm.
world and a little more like abstract concept. Jeremy, I tend to pick more of like cat,
Yeah.
library, like just
Yeah.
little more like descriptive things that weren't. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Didn't have anything else to say besides that. It was just even just the way we describe the world. Of course,
Yeah.
they're gonna be different, but it was 2 different aspects.
I don't know. When I read that, for whatever reason, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't know why. I
That's
don't know.
a statement too.
Yeah, so maybe that is. But I was just like, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah.
Well,
I'm like,
and
we
I
don't.
And I think that's interesting because, maybe at that moment and even still you think, well, I don't see the purpose in this or whatever. I mean, that is
It's
a decision.
It's 5 words. I can't describe the world in 5 words. I mean, how do you do that?
Or just pick 5 out of the million.
Right, and how do you do that? So that's where I can't choose.
That's too much, so I won't.
Yeah, I'm not going to
Okay.
do it. That's why. Yeah.
There you
That's
go.
my
That
defense.
says something about you for sure. Okay.
So I did like if I can point out
Yeah.
on page 155 when she talks about the Cherokee story
Yeah.
and the grandson asking the grandfather telling the grandson there are 2 animals that live inside his heart, a wolf and a lamb, and the grandson asks what he is to do, and the grandfather replies, "Feed the lamb." Okay, and what I liked about that, and because part of this was just like, as I was reading through this, thinking, everything is how you perceive the world, and not getting stuck in a situation where somebody is like doing something that's harmful to you, and it's not just, I'm just perceiving the world differently than they are, kind of thing, and,
Right.
and that's not it. But so this helped me to like kind of reconcile that kind of thought that I had in my mind, and that you still need to have that little wolf, in you to like make sure that you aren't going to be taken advantage of, basically, but you don't feed the wolf, you feed the lamb. So I thought that was really cool.
And I think that the way that you, the way that you react to even a violent situation is your way of being able to have some control in the situation. There's a story that I feel like it's the I don't know for sure. I can't remember, and I'm not going to waste the time finding it. I feel like it was a story told by Thupten Jinpa, the guy who wrote A Fearless Heart. If I'm wrong, I can't remember. But anyway, so there's a story of I believe it's a Buddhist man who was captured. I may be wrong about that, but anyway, so it's this man that was captured, and he was in a terrible prison, and his way of keeping himself sane and as safe as possible throughout this entire process of being tortured was he was able to remain compassionate to the people that were torturing him. And so that was and they did horrible things to him, but that was how he maintained himself, because that was the one thing he can control. And so, even when he was, when people talked to him afterwards, he said, yeah, I felt love and compassion towards those people. And so that's an example of being able to, control, using the lamb in that situation and feeding the lamb as far as that's concerned. Or, because otherwise, you could match hate with hate, and then that just eats you up, and then they win, But if you can still retain that compassion inside, then that just builds you up.
And that reflects Gandhi.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah, and how they mentioned how he did not hate his oppressors.
Yep. And there's one of the quotes that I read from the mindfulness book that I read at the end of class is from Martin Luther King Jr., and it mentions something about how, you choose not only to hit a man, but you choose not to hate a man as well. I'm butchering that, but part of nonviolence is not just not being physically aggressive, but also choosing not to destroy your own heart and to remove hate in that way as well. It's hard. Nobody says this is easy. And the thing that she says here, we cannot love or hate something about another person or the world unless it's already inside of us, and that's what you mentioned earlier, Marianne. The world gives you what you see. The Buddhists say that the universe dies when you do because you've created your own little world of reality. I really like that. Because then that's interesting, and that's important and that goes into the little story that she mentioned about the fish in the pond. So although there are 12 fish, how many ponds are there? There are 12, because there is a pond. For each fish believes there's a pond there. So there are 12 ponds. It's interesting, yeah. So we each live in our own little world. It is kung fu. And one of the things that so me being raised by an artist, I see things a little bit differently, or I come to things from, that's part of what's in my package is my mom. And so as I was reading this about, how we reflect, or the world is reflected from us and so forth, it made me think about an artist painting someone else's image. So, if I were to try to paint somebody else's portrait, I'm not necessarily exactly painting how that person feels. I'm painting how I feel about that person and how I perceive that person. And then it made me think about Picasso's Blue period, when he was, this was like a 3-year period when a very close friend of his had committed suicide, and all of his paintings were in hues of blues and blue-greens. It was one of his least popular, any painting that he painted at that time period was the least popular. He fell from people's graces. He couldn't sell any of those paintings. Now they're extremely, valued. But that was his reflection, and you can see he did all of these portraits and these pictures of people, and if you look at them, they're all sort of like their heads are down, they're looking down, their arms are just, their shoulders are dropped, and it just made me think, like, are those people actually depressed, or is that's him putting it on those people? I wonder if those people were actually
He's just seeking out depressed people to paint.
and it could be that, like, I don't want to be around happy people.
But either way, that would still be his perception of the world, though. It's like, oh yeah, I don't want happy people. It's still kind of the world through his eyes.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
I've always thought of the kind of like the fish with the 12 ponds, because that was one of the things I read here. And I'm sure everybody's felt, like the Truman Show, and you're just like, am I in the Truman Show right now? Like, are the three of you sitting here so like people can watch TV? But then it's like, well, I bet a lot of other people feel that same way too. So what if everybody in the world is essentially simultaneously thinking they're the one that's on the Truman Show?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the same way. It's it's one world, but at the same time, it's 7 billion different perceptions of the same world.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking when I was reading this, it's like the Matrix. That was another
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, what if we're in the Matrix?
Right.
I take a red pill.
Blue pill. Oh yeah, and you can go real deep into that, like that whole concept, and that could get into one of those like deep spirals that sometimes it's okay to go into that spiral, and sometimes it's best not. Just look at that from the outside. Yeah. The her whole section here on tracing it back. And tracing any disharmony back to ourselves will help us unpack a box we have ourselves wrapped in. I think that's sort of stating the same thing from a different direction a little bit, so a lot of what she had already talked about. But being able to recognize, and I think that that's an interesting practice, when you get yourself into a moment, and it doesn't even have to be like a very profound or even negative moment, like any moment, you recognize, how am I responding to this thing? What is my reaction to something? And think about, why is it that I have that first? Why is it that I have that thought? I think that that's interesting to think back on yourself. Like today, Erin and I were taking a walk, and I said we were at a certain point, and it was warm, and there was a little bit of a sweetness in the air, and I really like that. It's almost like, and what I said to him was, it's like one person is making a donut somewhere, and I can smell just a little bit of that donut. It wasn't like a whole factory of donuts. It was just like one donut in my nose, and it was delicious. And then I was just thinking back, like, why do I like that sweet smell? And it's primarily because most of the places I've lived have been in this area, and one of my favorite things is early in the morning, because I'm a morning person, it's a little bit warm, and you can smell the bakery, and you can smell it all wafting. It used to be the Wonder Bread Bakery, and then it was whatever it was, Kroger's or Giant Eagle or whatever, so it was harkening back to my childhood and just loving that smell, So it doesn't always have
Smelling
to
it
be
right now, aren't you?
donuts.
But you can kind of, as
Yes.
you created that well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think it's interesting. Like, very much a lot of who I am is Clintonville, and so when I was a kid, because I grew up on Erie Road. Well, my grandparents did anyway, and so we were down there in the bird sanctuary, and so I heard owls a lot. And I don't hear owls much over here, but every once in a while there is an owl family that's growing up that has their babies sometimes in Glen Echo, and Meow talks about it sometimes, whatever. And so a couple times in the past couple weeks, I've heard an owl perched near my house. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember, that's what an owl sounds like, and then it makes me think of being a kid. So so tracing things back doesn't always have to be negative. You don't always have to think like, why is my first instinct to dislike this thing? It can be, why do I really enjoy this thing? So I have a question for the group. Have you ever had a moment or a time period? Oh, is somebody coming?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hello? Hi. Come on in.
I'm so sorry.
Hey. Yeah, no, we've got about 20 minutes and then we'll be wrapping up, but come on in. So my question to the group is, have you ever had a belief or a thought or something that you sort of grew up with that you at one point reevaluated and changed?
I know the answer is yes, but I can't think of an example.
Okay.
I'm sure that
Yeah, so that's why I'm being quiet.
And I guess it, more of a question would be like, is there anything that you could think of that might be even recent? As kids, obviously as children, we have a different set of truths and beliefs and things that we enjoy. I mean, that would be a real easy one to probably think about. Like, as a kid, I enjoyed roller coasters, and after I turned 30, I don't know what happened to my inner ear, but I can't even handle being on a roller coaster. But as far as like a belief in something, there are a lot of things that I can think of that I used to believe to be true.
Well, I mean, I was always told growing up that homosexuality was wrong.
Yeah.
And I guess, as a child, you haven't developed your beliefs necessarily yet. You're just absorbing stuff that people have told you,
Yes.
whatever. And so I would hesitate to call it was my belief, I guess, at that point. But then, when my best friend came out and like really part of college, and I really had to really think about it, then I was like, no, I don't believe that. I don't think that's right. You know what I mean? So I guess, but it wasn't really something that really I had to like confront or think about that much, when I was younger necessarily, whatever. But I mean, I guess I held the belief that it was wrong, but that was just, again, it was because it was just one of those things that it was like, I was told and I just kind of went with it and whatever. And then when I actually had to finally think about it and examine it and be like, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. How does this, then...
Well, it was a lot like me because I was told that it was wrong. I just kind of didn't think about it, and I knew like a couple kids in high school that didn't really know that were gay. And I was like, okay, I don't know. I was told. I didn't really care that much. I didn't think about it until the first time I remember really thinking about it was sometime in college. Somebody said, like, what happens if you had a kid and your kid came out as gay? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I think I might, like, I wouldn't be mad or upset or anything. I was like, I think I just might be a little like disappointed that it didn't work out. And they were like, wow, like I can't believe that. I was like, oh my gosh, like, and like. Maybe not that day, but like within like a short period of time, it was like, yeah, why would I be disappointed?
Yeah.
And now it's just like I'm almost like, why did I think that way?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make any difference. I'm almost like, oh, like idiot 20-year-old or 20-year-old Phil or whatever. But it was more like I was like ignorant of the situation. That was my initial reaction right then. And now that I've learned more and know a lot more people, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it was,
of course not.
It was connected. Because this friend that I knew since kindergarten. In fact, we were best friends. I mean, first day of kindergarten, we got on the bus together. And we sat down and we became best friends. And we were friends all through elementary, through high school, and in college. And like in sophomore year of college, he like called me up one night. He's like, "I have something to tell you," and he tells me, and I was just like, "What?" It's stupid because I should have figured it out.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, how did you not know?
I did. I mean.
Yeah,
I should have known,
You were like,
but it just never, I don't know, it just never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, even though he was my roommate for a while and he had guys over in his room, and I'm like,
okay, you probably,
I was just a naive, whatever you want to, whatever.
That's awesome.
But I just remember calling my mom because I was just like, I got off the phone and I'm like, oh my god, so I called my mom, I'm like, Mom, Dan's gay. And she's like, so? And I was like, what?
Oh.
I'm like, what? She's like, he's still Dan, right? And I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, okay, bye.
thanks for wasting my time.
I'm like, oh,
Great
okay. I was like, so it was like this, and I'm like, yeah. And it was just, I was like, yeah, why was I like upset about it? Why did I care? I was just like, and it was kind of late at night too, so I'm sure my mom was just like, so, I'm in bed.
Like you didn't do that before?
Yeah. So what? Yeah. So, but to me, I was just like, oh, why did I like? Why was I all bound up or wound up about that? I was like, whatever. So anyway, yeah, it was like, so that would be, I guess, a kind of moment, I guess. So. Yeah.
Well, and I think that even those beliefs that are somehow taught to you, whether it's somewhere in school or a friend or your parents or whatever, a lot of people, for example, are a certain, like, they may be Republican or Democrat because that's how their parents were or something like that. And then, for the longest time, you just follow whatever your parents had said because you haven't formed an opinion yet. And I think that absolutely counts as being one of those things where you do spend some time to reevaluate and think about, because my grandparents were Republicans, but Republican was different back then. But I knew that, but it's like, I don't know, there was a certain point where I was like, because I remember my grandmother saying that she wanted to revoke herself being a New Yorker because Hillary Clinton was the whatever she was of New York, and
senator,
senator from New York, and I'm like, Grandma, like really, like, so anyway, but I do remember like most of my life wanting to believe the same things my grandparents did because I looked up to them, and then all of a sudden I'm like, boy, I just don't agree with you on this.
Well, and I remember kind of like that because my family was mostly conservative, and I remember thinking flag burning was bad, and I was just like, oh yeah, it's a symbol of America. And now I've grown up, I was like, yeah, it's just a symbol though.
Right.
So like if you burn it, like you're saying something, it's like, okay, it's just a flag.
Right.
I don't know. And so I've kind of come around to it. It's like the kneeling with the anthem. It's like, all right, yeah, they're kneeling.
Right.
They're not even burning it. It's like they're still just kneeling, and then they go play football. It's like,
right.
Well, why do you care? I don't know.
Yes.
So yeah, that's actually something very similar. That's
Yeah.
kind of thing.
So the idea of tracing it back, I think, is fantastic, and taking just anything, the minute that you feel something, think about why, and it's just fascinating. And don't spend your whole time doing that because you gotta get something accomplished, but do think about, especially, the climate that we're in right now, the things going on in our country, try not to have a knee-jerk reaction to things. Think about, what you believe, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Think about why, and think about the way that you might be able to change the way that you react to something. So an example that I have would be, I fully disagree with a lot of things that Trump says. However, there are some positive things that are happening because of the negative things in the administration. A lot of things are bubbling to the surface that have been dormant for a very long time. So I disagree with the way that the things are being the way that things are bubbling to the surface, but the fact that they are, okay, that's the way that I'm going to look at this, right? Because we have a racist country. There's racism still here. We thought that because we elected a black president that we were over it. Nope. There is still a lot of sexism going on, and so we're fleshing it out. So a lot of eventually this will be good, is I guess what I'm saying. So think about that.
Well, and me as a librarian, I always want everything that people say to be like true and accurate and whatever. And so I try to be as unbiased as possible, so I don't engage like on social media or anything in political discussions. But I do engage when I think people are saying something is wrong. And so somebody had an example of something.
Wrong.
Yeah. So somebody, or like, they don't have this like a citation, or they don't. It's like this just seems like not right. So I've engaged with people saying, like somebody was upset about the way Google was doing something. They were being very, very conservative about it. And I was like, well, that's not actually how Google does things. And then he was like, well, but I don't like this one thing. And I'm like, that's not what I'm arguing about. I was like, I'm telling you like how Google actually works. And they didn't say anything. So I was like, okay, well, I hope I got my point across. And then Trump had a whole bunch of quotes about what his like lawyer getting raided or whatever.
Yeah.
And this person was just like, oh, look at all these bad things that Trump are saying. And there was no like source. And I was just like, is this even real? Like, I'm not saying that I'm a Trump supporter, but like, I need some sources before I like make any judgment.
Yes.
And then the person was like, oh yeah, here's several sources. And I was like, okay, thank you. That's what I wanted.
Yes.
And so it was like, all right. So as long as like people, like if I want somebody to see that and not have like a knee-jerk reaction and just
Yes.
be like, oh, is there a source? And be like, oh, it is real. Okay, well now I can react because it's real. So I'm trying to, in my own little way, get rid of that fake news stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the crusade that I've decided to do. Like I want everything that's out there to be right and
Yeah.
proper.
Good
Whether
or bad, it needs to be
whether I agree with
correct.
it or not, yeah.
It needs to be factual. That's great. Yes. Yeah. More people need to do that with the news.
So what do you think about her discussion about the witness concept and the different way that we approach things from a Western philosophical concept as opposed to from the East? You know, in the West we're always trying to figure things out and trying to fix it and analyze it and that kind of stuff. And the Eastern thought is just like, just being with it and seeing it. And I guess I even have problems describing Eastern because I'm so Western.
Because I don't even understand it.
Because I'm all like trying to analyze it.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for the Eastern thought because I'm not that familiar with it, but I can absolutely see how that could be true. And I think, if you examine it from my understanding of Buddhism and Taoism and things like that, I can absolutely see how that's where that is coming from. And we even learn that in yoga. Obviously, this whole book is about yoga, right? But the practice of recognizing something, like she says, trying to even not put your ego into it. A dog is barking. Okay, well, my ego comes in. I hear a dog barking. And then more comes in. I hear a dog being really loud and obnoxious and then making some other judgments about that. Instead of just saying, a dog is barking.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't have to be annoyed by it, or I can be annoyed by it. I have control over my reaction to that. So, yeah, if you just witness something, that's hard.
And having that neutral mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's something I've been doing in therapy with a therapist about even just like my own emotions. So now it is me, and so I'm saying like I'm noticing whatever, but then I was saying, well, my problem is like I'll say like, oh, I'm noticing anxiety, and then you're supposed to not do it. And I'll be like, well, I'm noticing feelings of anxiety, and then I'll go, uh-oh, and she's like, okay, well then you just noticed something else. And I was like, what? She's like, well, you're saying I'm noticing feelings of anxiety. Uh-oh, now I'm noticing like feelings of fear about my anxiety.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's always kind of something to, I don't know, to notice.
Yeah.
Without judging it. So even if you judge it, you can notice the judgment in yourself. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around it.
Judge or just to recognize that I can't look at something with an absolute clean slate. It's like in physics, is it the Pauli principle or whatever, where the act of viewing something changes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, like
changes the.
Like if you're trying to.
Yeah, so.
Like a car tire, like as soon as you measure it, like the air is coming out, so it's wrong already. Well, essentially, it's changing.
Yeah. So
we got the same
you
thing
can
in
never
anthropology, too.
completely be objective in any observation. Your presence,
Is
observing
already
it is already impacting.
Yeah.
But at least knowing that okay, I'm looking at this, and my presence here is going to change this. Is like I think the idea, right?
Yeah.
Not so much that you can't like completely be. I'm completely judgment free.
Well,
right?
however, though, I did actually add that. I highlighted her whole paragraph about being a witness and all of that. and witness without judgment. I completely like wrote that in for myself because I do think that I'm doing this for myself because I find that the judgment part is the most challenging part for me. And you know, recognizing a situation, recognizing something that's going on, non-judgment is very challenging. And I think that that's where I get hung up. So the judgment part for me is very important. Whether she intends it to be there or not, obviously, she didn't say anything about judgment for that witness part.
But, so to me, I just think that's something else that you notice. So even if you notice being judgmental, it's just like, okay, well, at least I'm aware of that.
It's the awareness.
Yeah, and so I think that's what I'm told.
Witnessing
is that is the path to freedom. That's not the word I'm looking for, but but it makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, you know, talking about the sort of freedom and surrender and all that. Since our next chapter is going to be on surrender. But so on page 158, she talks about Swami Veda writes, "It is by surrender," and I love this quote. "It is by surrendering the limitations of its own banks that a river becomes the mighty ocean. Do not be afraid to throw away the trinkets of your ego to gain the diamond of grace. And this process begins with growing our ability to witness." And then I put a little arrow saying, "This is also Ishvara Pranidhana because you're talking about surrender." But I love that I love all the metaphors where people talk about like the river and the water and things like that. I'm a Pisces, so I love it. But it's absolutely true because thinking about, you know, you would never get to the ocean. The river would never get to the ocean if it stayed within its own banks. You know, if you anthropomorphize the river. But I just think that's fantastic. I absolutely love it. That's so true.
And I like how she at the very end, it's a little paragraph about meditation. That's good. That's important.
Yeah.
You know, I was like,
I highlighted that.
oh, really?
And by the way, yes.
Throw that in there.
And I did. I actually highlighted that one thing where she said meditation is an important aspect of self-study. Meditation is so important. The practice of meditation and being silent with yourself is hard for a lot of people. Let me break that apart. Being is hard. Being silent is hard. Being silent with yourself is very hard for people. The voices, the thoughts, all the shit from your day, all of that is really hard to silence and to put aside for a moment and let yourself just observe being, you know. So I highly recommend practicing, you know, going to a meditation class, April 21st. But yeah, it's being able to just be with yourself. If it's hard, then I think investigating why it's hard is part of that self-study, is part of that self-practice. I know plenty of people who aren't content being alone. I absolutely love being alone.
Nope. I really enjoy talking with people because it comes naturally, and the chatter in my mind goes a lot. So it is hard for me to be alone sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's also exhausting being around people.
It is. Well, so sometimes it's just nice
I can't win.
Sometimes it's nice to be around people, but not necessarily talk to them. You know, I like going to a bar just to be around humans, or like going to like Cup of Joe.
Just like sit and read.
Yeah, like that's quote unquote being social to me. It's like, I'm not gonna talk to any of you people if you're just around me. That's enough.
But you might smile at somebody.
Oh, I'll be
or say
pleasant,
something not
sipping
to
my
have.
coffee.
Yeah.
Just don't talk to me. Okay, so let's review the 4 exercises. Oh, number 1. Okay, so hold on. So I wanted to point out the haiku that started this chapter. So I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to the other haikus, but this one jumped out at me. Know yourself so well that you will grow into your wholeness and greatness. I love it. One of the quotes that I read out of the mindfulness book is, I cannot, and I think it's also by Martin Luther King, but I cannot be what I should be until you are what you should be. And then there's more to this wonderful quote that I'm going to chop up. But anyway, so anyway, I love that. Becoming who you are is very important. And also, I really like the statement from Hudson Smith. We all carry it within us. Supreme strength, the fullness of wisdom, unquenchable joy. It is never thwarted and cannot be destroyed, but it is hidden deep, which is what makes life a problem. And I love that. So anyway, week 1, 99% of what bothers you is about you. 99% of what bothers others has nothing to do with you. This week, notice how you turn the above statement around, blaming others for your own problems and taking responsibility for others' problems. Practice taking responsibility for yourself and letting others be responsible for themselves. I like it. What's the quote? Something about sweep your own front porch. Stop bothering with others. Let them take care of themselves. Week 2. This week, notice what you project onto others. That's a hard one for me. These projections are things you are unwilling or unable to acknowledge in yourself. Remember, you can't notice something in another person if it is not already in you, both your pettiness and your magnificence. Grow into full responsibility for yourself. Week 3, this week, discover some of the boxes you have wrapped yourself in, or you have yourself wrapped in. Do this by tracing all ripples of disharmony back to yourself. Notice what personal belief system caused the disharmony. Is your belief true? Are you experiencing reality or a box? Support your efforts with these words from Yamas and Niyamas. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And week 4, this week, grow the power of your witness by watching all your actions and thoughts as if you were watching a movie. Begin to experience yourself as supreme strength, the fullness of wisdom, unquenchable joy. For this month, ponder the words of Hudson Smith and unwrap yourself. Any closing thoughts, comments, questions?
I've heard some version of that week 4 one before, like pretend like you're in a play, essentially. I don't know, it's still really hard. I've never been able to do it.
Psychologist.
Right. No, I've heard it like in like a few different books in like different kinds and ways, and I just it's a hard one to do.
Intermission or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Play.
You go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I'm usually eating popcorn.
Yeah. Falling asleep.
All right. Well, see what I mean? We went in a lot of different directions there. This really was one that hit home for me quite a bit. I don't know that my political views would be very surprising to anybody. But one of the things that I've been trying to really focus on this past year and a half or so is recognizing that I don't know what the other side is thinking. I don't know what anybody is thinking at any moment. I'm certainly not psychic, and I can't, by looking at a person, I can't know their entire background. I can guess, and I may be wrong. So, trying to think about, maybe think about where somebody is coming from, but then also recognize that you may be wrong, and that it's helpful to try to communicate, open up lines of communication with people that, number one, that you think you might disagree with because you may be wrong. But also open up lines of communication with people maybe that you already know has a different opinion on things. And I don't even mean political. It could mean anything. And don't be afraid of disagreement. Have maybe an understanding going into a difficult conversation, or going into a conversation with somebody saying, if we do disagree, then let's be open and willing to continue to say things that we disagree with and not get angry. because there is nothing wrong with somebody else having a different point of view, because they do have a bit different background. So, challenge yourself. The problem these days, is we kind of have ourselves into little bubbles, not only just social media and online, but we do. I mean, that's nature, is to gather around people who are similar to you. But when you find yourself in a social situation where you didn't choose everybody that's in the room, it's not a party at your house, it's not a party with your friends, at the bar where you can't choose who all comes in, strike up a conversation with somebody before too many drinks happen, because that's when you probably find it harder to control your emotions. But if you're in a situation like that, open up a conversation and practice. Talking to somebody that you don't know and somebody that you don't know where they stand on things, it does take practice. It takes practice to try to mitigate your own emotions, and try to present yourself in a way that isn't defensive or threatening to somebody else. And here's the thing. I mean, if you've ever read, what's his name? The book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a fascinating book. I think it still applies today. If I sat and thought about it, you know who I'm talking about. There are plenty of people listening to this who are like, oh yeah, it's that guy's name. Anyway, it takes practice. All of this takes practice. Being social, communicating with people takes practice. So do that and do little baby steps. Okay. Turning to the person that's behind you at the grocery store and just saying something that's, non-threatening about the day. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Something like that. Just practice talking to people. So anyway, if you're in Columbus, Ohio, I hope you're enjoying the weather. I'm recording this on Friday the 13th. That's all right. I didn't notice it until now. It's a wonderful day. The discussion we had was actually on Wednesday, April 11th. If you're ever in the neighborhood, Wednesdays, 7:30 p.m. If you're in Columbus or in Clintonville, please stop by the Yoga Happiness Studio. Join us for yoga talks, whatever we're talking about, even if you haven't done the reading or whatever it is. We'd love to have different voices, different points of view. So come on in. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye, everyone. Oh yeah, and I forgot to remind you. I'm just so excited about Svadhyaya. Next week, we are finishing up the Niyamas, finishing up the entire book, and the last chapter is on Ishvara Pranidhana, which is surrender. So there you go. Anyway, all right, now, for real, have a great weekend. Bye, guys.